Here's a wild stat: over 9 million SUVs were sold in the US last year. So what can this do to stand apart from the crowd?
This is the 2025 Kia Sorento, and it competes in a very crowded 3-row SUV class of vehicles like the Honda Pilot, Toyota Highlander, and Ford Explorer, just to name a few. It starts at about $32,000, and this one, the higher-end X-Pro SX Prestige, clocks in at just over $50,000 after destination. I'm going to be showing you all the features of this new Sorento, including what makes this X-Pro a bit different, and finally we'll wrap up with a road drive where I'll share where I think your money is best spent in the Sorento lineup.
What do we think about this glacial white pearl Sorento? That's what they call the white model here, and clearly it's got the stormtrooper look going on with the white with black accents. This also has the X-Pro package, which is a bit of an off-road focus package. You're downsizing your wheels to 17s rather than 20s in this model. Also getting BFG all-terrain tires, things like a roof rack, some slightly different bumpers, and also a center locking differential, which should help you on off-roading. Overall, I think this is a pretty good looking SUV, especially compared to the previous generation model before they refreshed this with the more saggy bumpers. But what do you think? Leave a comment below. These days, it seems like most manufacturers are consolidating the engine options in their different models, but Kia still offers quite a few different setups depending on which trim you get. 3, in fact, for the Sorento. You can get the hybrid version, which is a 1.6 liter turbo paired with some electric motors. You can get the base version, which is a 2.5 liter naturally aspirated motor, or you can get this one, which is the 2.5 liter turbocharged model, which makes great power. The reason that you buy this, of course, 281 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque. We're gonna see out on the road, this thing, once you get it going, is pretty quick. And in fact, most of them come with an 8-speed transmission, of course automatic, and this one specifically is DCT. They have some different variances depending on which engine you're getting in terms of which transmission corresponds to that engine. Now, of course, fuel economy is another topic. This one claims to get 20 city, 27 highway, although like most vehicles, I'm not getting quite those numbers. Kia has been absolutely killing it on the interior game as of late, and the Sorento is no exception to that. What they do super well here, if you haven't been in a Kia in a long time, go sit in one because it feels more premium than the price would suggest, and they've just come such a long way. So if you're mentally thinking about Kias from 10, 15 years ago, will absolutely blow you away. It's chock full of features, of course, which is something that they do really well. This has, wireless charger, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, wireless, heated and cooled seats, a 360-degree camera for when you're parking. It's just got all the bells and whistles. It's also got, lane centering, which works pretty decently, and adaptive cruise control. I mean, for the price, it's just really loaded. And the other part that I like about this is they have gone away with some physical buttons, but they have like the bare minimum to make this still quite usable. They have this screen down here, which is sort of a screen, sort of button, sort of knobs. So you can adjust the temperature with this knob. You can also adjust the volume with this knob. You sort of switch back and forth with this button here, which will go between the HVAC and the radio. Really sort of interesting way to handle that sort of scenario. And I like how simplistic it is and clean design, but you don't lose too much in the way of buttons. I typically complain about cars that don't have physical buttons, but I don't find this terribly frustrating. The infotainment is also very easy to use. We already talked about the Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, which is mostly what you're going to use, but the menu structure here is very simple, and I like how the screen is integrated into the dash, at least integrated between the gauge cluster and the screen itself. But otherwise, these seats are really nice, super supportive. They have lumbar support, which is something that I always go on about. This one, being the X-Pro, gets a center locking differential and has some driving modes here as well. Also heated steering wheel. Once again, top of line model, you're getting everything, including a pretty big sunroof. Now the middle row seats have a ton of room back there. This one has the captain's chairs, of course. The third row is where you sort of suffer in this 3-row category SUV. There are certainly bigger 3-row SUVs. This one is on the smaller end. You can definitely put children back there, but it's hard to fit adults. Now, with all that said, let's try and throw a bike in the back to see how usable this is as an SUV.
Recall that both the Honda Pilot and Toyota Highlander fit my extra large frame mountain bike with ease, something I sort of expect from a 3-row SUV at this point. The Sorento, on the other hand, is smaller in terms of 3-row SUVs, and it shows in the bike test. I simply can't fit my mountain bike in the back without disassembly. The rear opening isn't wide nor tall enough to accommodate it. My road bike, however, fits without issues, so it sort of depends on the size of your bike. As always, if you enjoyed the bike test and the rest of this video, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and leaving a comment below so you don't miss future videos.
Let's talk about what it's like to drive the Sorento. And you know what? The first thing I noticed when I drive this vehicle is how relatively small it feels for the size of vehicle. So in terms of 3-row SUVs, this feels more like a smaller SUV to drive than, you know, something like a Yukon or some of the, of course, larger SUVs in the segment. It just really kind of shrinks around you, and I think that's a big advantage to vehicles like this. I suspect a lot of people who are coming from smaller vehicles, even smaller SUVs that maybe have an expanding family that obviously need 3 rows for kids or something like that. You know, you don't want to feel like you're driving a behemoth. This thing feels maneuverable. It has great sight lines, great visibility. This hood really slopes down so you can see the whole road. It's not one of those hoods that for aesthetic reasons extends for 5 feet and you can't like see much. Same thing in the back and the rear quarters. Like, you can see everything around here, and the vehicle just kind of shrinks around you despite being, once again, a 3-row SUV, not a small vehicle. It feels relatively small to drive. And yeah, you could say like dimensionally it is a touch smaller than some other 3-row SUVs that it competes with that we talked about earlier, but it's not significant enough dimensionally exterior wise in order, or as much as it corresponds to when you drive it. This just feels like pretty easy to drive. So that is a nice feature of the Sorento. Another feature that we'll talk about, and I'll get my grievances out of the way, which are few. Let's start with just kind of a launch here. You're gonna hear my foot hit the floor. I'm gonna go full throttle, and let's just observe what happens here. Big delay here, right? All right, now, first of all, I have start-stop on, so that is a bit of it. But even if you don't have start-stop on, this thing is very slow to get going off the line. That's kind of a problem for a lot of high-strung 4-cylinders. You know, you have a 4-cylinder that needs to make a lot of power. It has low displacement. It has to make a lot of power because this is a big vehicle. So it just takes a while for that turbo to get going and make any sort of meaningful power. What I will say is that once it gets going, it makes plenty of power. In fact, I would call this thing quick. That you're never like yearning for power once it's going, but off the line, it's just not that responsive. And I find that very frustrating, especially when you're trying to, you know, you're sitting at a stop sign and you're waiting for cars to go by and you're trying to get through an opening, and you just put your foot down and there's just such a lag. Like I said, even with the start-stop off, it takes a while to get going, and that's regardless of what setting you're in here. We have these different drive modes: normal, eco, sport, smart, snow. Doesn't matter. I've put it in sport. It's like the same lack of response. So that's a bit frustrating, but other than that, like I said, once you get going, this thing is actually really quick. We'll talk about how you can kind of fix that towards the end of the video. But the rest of this, the transmission, otherwise is just fine. It doesn't get in the way. So that's one of the best things that you can say about transmission. You don't really notice it. The shifts are reasonably quick. It's smooth around town. It's smooth in a parking lot. So transmission, I have absolutely no qualms with. The suspension is great. It is set up, exactly how you would expect for an SUV like this. It's relatively soft, but it does have good body control. We're up here, obviously, on a twisty road, and it doesn't completely fall apart. You can still not hustle it, but you can get around corners without it like leaning like crazy and feeling like you're gonna careen off the side of this mountain. And also, it just soaks up bumps really well. It doesn't have any real firmness to that, and part of that could be these 17-inch wheels, which are relatively small for the vehicle, with the pretty meaty sidewall tires, which is ultimately, I think, what you're after with something like this. You don't need 20-something inch wheels that are just going to make the ride quality even worse. Now, let's talk about the brakes, which are relatively numb and kind of give you quite a bit of bite up front, but not as bad as that Elantra I just got out of. I think some of these Kia Hyundai products really get brakes quite bad, but this actually feels a little more natural to me than that vehicle did, so that is good. The steering is incredibly light and just fine. Like it's accurate. I don't think anyone cares about steering feel in a 3-row SUV, but it's nice and light, so it's not a chore around town. And you would say, like, okay, that's obvious, it should be, but that CX-90 I got out of not too long ago had the most obnoxiously heavy steering for absolutely no reason. So not every manufacturer gets this right. The other thing that we need to talk about here is, as we kind of like sum all this up, is like where I think the value is in this vehicle. Oh, one other thing. One of the things that we didn't get to when I did the stop start is it has auto hold. So I have my foot off the brake here. It just holds the vehicle for you while you're at a stop. And I've talked about this before. That is such an underrated feature. You don't realize like how nice that is until you get back in a vehicle that doesn't have it. There's just a certain luxury. You come to a stoplight, it goes into auto hold, and you can take your foot off and just rest it. That's real nice. That's a real nice touch. Like I said, seems insignificant, but I'm telling you, once you have it, it is really nice. So where is the value in the Sorento? I, not too long ago, reviewed that Hyundai Santa Fe, and that is more or less Hyundai's equivalent to the Kia Sorento. And that one was the hybrid version. And what I'll say is I much prefer the hybrid powertrain compared to this. Now, yes, this makes outright more power, but I don't think anyone's getting in drag races with their Sorento or their Santa Fe for that matter. What I liked about that Santa Fe, specifically the hybrid powertrain, is it was much more responsive off the line, and it was still plenty quick enough. Like, it was adequately enough powered to where I didn't feel like I was like, wanting for more power. So you get better fuel economy with the hybrid, you get more response, and I think that's where this Sorento is best bought. I would personally go with the hybrid or even the base version. The base version isn't going to have a turbo, not going to have the turbo lag that is associated with this vehicle. And then you're also keeping the price down compared to this top of the line 2.5 turbo. And I would also skip the X-Pro package, just to be honest. I think when it comes to these vehicles, what is the Venn diagram of someone who is purchasing a Sorento, a Kia SUV, and going off-road? I think there's not a big crossover. And ultimately, if you're buying something for off-road, you're probably looking at other vehicles that are a little more off-road tailored. So, and that perhaps that's what Kia is trying to do, is convert people. I just don't think there's a big market for Kia buyers and off-roaders. So yes, you do get a center locking differential here. Who is going to use that in a Sorento? That is my major question. So would skip that piece, keep the options a little bit lower, keep this closer to $45,000, and I think you'll have a good value specifically with that hybrid. I can see why I see so many on the road Everything works really well. It's comfortable, it's quiet, it's relatively fuel efficient, and hopefully they figured out some of their reliability issues that they've had in the past. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and follow me on Instagram, EatSleepDrive TV. I post some behind the scenes type stuff there, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Peace.